Right, okay, so the government of Mali passed a law against excavating and exporting the wonderful terracotta sculptures from the old city of D, but it could not enforce it. All right, so Mali passed this law from not doing this, but it couldn't enforce it. And it certainly could not afford to fund thousands of archaeological excavations. The result was that many fine D terracotta sculptures were illicitly excavated in the 1980s and sold to foreign collectors who rightly admired them. Okay, so since they couldn't afford to do it right and they couldn't enforce this law, they had a bunch excavated and sold to foreign collectors. Because these sites were looted, much of what we would most like to know about this culture, much that could have been learned had the sites been preserved by careful archaeologists, may never be known. Oh, this is so depressing. We lost all of our history because they couldn't afford to protect it, so now it's all damaged and we're not going to learn anything. Bummer. All right, you got the next paragraph.
Okay. It has been natural to condemn such pillaging. I don't know what that is.
What do you
And
think it is? What do you think pillaging is from that?
I'm just gonna assume it's like such act or
Yeah,
something.
like some like destroy I'm thinking like you just like go ahead and take what you want and leave it and destroy type of thing. Yeah, excellent.
Okay, and through a number of declarations from UNESCO and other international bodies, a protective doctrine has evolved concerning the ownership of many forms of cultural property. The UNESCO doctrine. Okay, so like from this kind of sort of act, so it's like natural to condemn this sort of kind of act, or whatever, and then from this, UNESCO and all other like bodies have come up with like a sort of like like a belief kind of thing
Mhm.
called UNESCO doctrine. Okay, and then essentially this doctrine, how do you say that?
Doctrine.
Then provides the cultural artifacts should be regarded as a property of the culture.
So essentially, this doctrine that they created involves like who actually owns like cultural property. So it's like, where does this actually mean? And then it goes on for what you just read. It said that this doctrine then said these cultural artifacts should be property of the culture. I don't know what that means so far, but that seems important.
Yeah. For an individual belonging to that culture, such works are, using UNESCO terminology, part of an artistic and cultural patrimony. Um, okay.
What do you think that means?
Um, so I'm just gonna, so I'm thinking like it means, um, so like for someone who belongs to that culture, like these works of art, or these works, or whatever art, I guess, are like very artistically and culturally important, maybe.
Patrimony? I think that's like if it's a patrimony, like isn't that like family? Like isn't patrimony like patriarchate? Is kind of what I'm thinking. And so
uh
I'm thinking like maybe like these works are like very in tune to like their culture. Like it's almost like an emotional connection. Like they're just really ingrained.
yeah, I see.
So we're saying that these works that were taken are artistic and cultural part, taken directly from this document's language. Cool.
Okay. Further, a number of countries have strengthened the UNESCO doctrine by declaring all antiquities that originate within their borders to be state property that cannot be freely exported. So like these other countries also, they stand by the UNESCO doctrine, and they say that like, oh, like all these like old things that like originate from the borders, or state property that
Yeah.
cannot be made. Like
So
they
how
just
does the second paragraph relate to the first paragraph?
um so like the first paragraph is like specifically about like Mali,
Mhm.
um and they're like sort of like giving like telling us, oh, like this problem exists, and then the government of Mali like came up with like this, like they passed a law against excavating and exporting.
Yeah. So essentially, like it's a specific example. It talks about Mali. It introduces like I like the word you use, the problem and like why it happened. And then what is the second and how does the second paragraph relate to that?
So the second paragraph is like specifically, I guess what. So the second paragraph is like, oh, there's actually like a declaration by this international body that talks about this. I guess, right?
Yeah, it's like it talks about this larger doctrine, but then and it's like a larger document that does relate to the issue we talked about in paragraph 1.
Yeah.
And the big point that I want to pay attention to is just where it says that the doctrine is um oh essentially the doctrine provides that cultural artifacts should be like, I feel like that's really important when it comes to the first paragraph,
Mm-hmm.
like about Mali. But all right, cool, let's move on then. So accordingly, or like in addition to, or carrying on, it seems reasonable that the government of Mali, within whose borders the D antiquities are buried, be the one to regulate excavating D and to decide where the statutes should go. Okay, so like because so accordingly, like so according to this doctrine, it seems reasonable that Mali within those borders that so within those borders are the ones that get to decide where these statutes should go. Okay. And then regrettably, I'm like, oh, that's an opinion word. Like the author is really coming in here. Regrettably, and this is a painful irony. Oh, wow, that's strong. Regulations prohibiting export and requiring repatriation. Oh, what is that? How do you say that? That's like whatever
I
you
think
give people
rep-
money to make up for what you did.
yeah, wasn't that reparations though?
Yes, can okay, requiring repatriation can discourage recording and preserving information about cultural antiquities, one of the key reasons for the UNESCO regulations. So I read that and I'm curious. I'm like, why does like prohibiting this discourage recording and preserving the information? Like, why does that matter? Like, the only thing I can think of is like maybe because people are going to do it secretly, so then you're going to lose it altogether because people are just going to hide that it even happened. I don't know. For example,
Or like
maybe it's going to tell us.
so the this part actually kind of confuses me, like the regrettably all the way down to like where we
Yeah.
ended.
So regrettably, and this is a painful irony. So, and this is the irony part. So they're saying like regulations. So whenever you regulate or prohibit someone from exporting, or you require people to like pay to
Mhm.
preserve information, it actually can cause people to like not save or preserve things. And I don't know why. Like I read that and I'm like curious, but that's the irony, right? It's like you would think that having these stipulations would be make things better, but actually
Okay, I see.
it can discourage. I don't know why though.
Yeah.
So, for example, if someone in London sells a figure from D with documentation that it came out of the ground there after the regulations were implemented, then the authorities committed to the restitution of objects taken illegally out of Mali may have the very evidence. Oh, they need to seize the figure. So maybe that's why, because people are going to have their items that they bought taken from them. So they don't
Yeah.
want to say where they're from. Interesting. All right, let's go on to the next paragraph.
Okay. Suppose that from the beginning, Mali had been helped by UNESCO to exercise its trusteeship of the terracotta sculptures by licensing excavations and educating people to recognize that such artifacts have greater value when they are removed carefully from the earth with accurate records of location. Where so like they're giving a scenario where like um, the government of Mali actually like they tell people, or yeah, like they tell people like, oh, like you know
Mm-hmm.
okay, so like government Mali, like they're giving a situation where like the government Mali actually gives people advice, I guess, that like yo, like actually license this stuff, right?
Because wasn't that a big issue in paragraph 1 where we said that they didn't have the resources to enforce it?
Yeah.
They didn't have like the money to like have like actual good excavation. So they didn't have the money and they didn't have the so they're saying like, hey, if they could have been backed by this, maybe they could have like actually had licensed excavations and educated people to know like, hey, if you would have removed this safely, it actually would be worth even more money.
So was it not removed safely before?
Well, I think what they're like, I'm reading this as if they were removed carefully from the earth, like maybe things got broken or something. Because if they're trying to go in and steal them, they might not have been. We can see. Does it say anything like this? Well, they does say the sites were looted. and things weren't preserved too.
Mm,
Oh, it does say they were illicitly excavated.
yeah, illegally. Right?
Yeah. All right. So next sentence.
So suppose Mali had required the objects be recorded and registered before leaving the excavation site and had imposed tax on exported objects to fund acquisitions of important pieces for the National Museum. So okay. So suppose like they did these two things. The excavations encouraged by such a system may have been less well conducted and less informative than proper, professionally administered excavations by accredited archaeologists. Okay, so like even if like they did these two things, like they did stuff properly, even then, um, like even then, these excavations wouldn't have been conducted properly, right? And there'd
Um,
be less information, right?
yes. So we're saying that the excavations encouraged by such a system may have been less well conducted and less informative than proper professionally administration excavation by accredited archaeologists. So we're saying like even if this would have happened, it still like wouldn't have been as good as if it was done like by the proper people. But then it goes on to say some people still would have avoided the rules. But would this not have been better than what actually happened? So I think we're saying like even this isn't ideal, but it could still be better than what originally happened. And what originally happened?
They were illegally taken, right?
And looted, right? And they damaged the site. And so like now we don't get to learn about anything because people went into this site and just took it and just left it in ruin. So it's like, well, now we can't even learn anything.
Mm,
So I feel like if I were to to explain like what's going on here, it's like we have this problem. Like Mali like didn't let people sell them, but they also couldn't finance them to bring them out like safely. And then we say like, but hey, we have this new regulation that really supports companies to own their own artifacts. But then unfortunately, like, but then it gives our third paragraph and says, but actually having these regulations actually like leads to people avoiding documenting them because they don't want to be traced. And then the end it says, so while we couldn't have done this, and while it still isn't perfect to have license excavating, it probably would have still have been better than what happened.
okay.
You feel like that's a good analysis of what was going on?
Yeah. So
Okay.
like, okay. So like what confused me is like there's so much stuff going on that like there's like different, I guess. Okay, so we're saying that like um it might have just been better if like stuff was just done illegally kind of thing.
Well, not better illegally. Well, do you understand why they're saying that essentially like the documentation route or the UNESCO route isn't perfect because it can lead to things like people not documenting things right, or it can lead to us like people not wanting to things have documented, but it's still better than what happened. So we're
But
not saying that what we're suggesting here isn't that it's perfect,
mhm.
but it's better than people just taking things illegally and trying to sell them under the table or whatever they're doing and then looting the place and destroying it. Or at least in this situation, maybe we could have protected a lot of things.
So the author is actually like in favor of the UNESCO thing.
Yes.
Like he's saying it's not perfect, but it's still better than like it being like looted and like illegally excavated and
Yeah. And then having everything damaged where we can't learn about the culture.
okay.
All right. So which of the following most accurately expresses the main point of the passage? So what do you think is the main point of the passage in your own words?
Um so I'd say like um what happened in like Mali wasn't ideal and okay we can say like okay UNESCO following the UNESCO doctrine is not ideal but it's better than what happened in Mali.
Yes, the author thinks that the UNESCO route is better than what happened.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, go ahead and start with A.
So declarations from UNESCO. and other international bodies concerning the ownership of cultural artifacts gave rise to doctrine based on the notion of artistic and cultural patrimony. Uh, it doesn't talk about Mali, does it?
No, and I feel like this is like one point, right? This is like out of paragraph two. It's ironically the paragraph, the sentence that I highlighted, but
Yeah,
that's just like one point, right? Like who has the ownership of it? I don't think it doesn't bring in the argument at all of, hey,
yeah,
it's not I really think we need something that shows that something's not ideal or something wasn't good and this is better.
yeah.
All right.
Preserve cultural knowledge at sites like the require solutions that are more flexible than simply passing laws prohibiting the excavation and export of antiquities. I don't think we were talking about preserving cultural knowledge, right? We were talking about like the actual
Well,
sculpture.
we do talk about the fact that this was looted, like, and we didn't preserve it.
But
But
like we're talking about sculptures now, like we're not talking about cultural knowledge.
well, it does say that like much of we could have learned had the sites been preserved and careful art. So part of the issue is that we didn't preserve cultural knowledge, like because we eluded it. But I do think it's a very narrow thing. And also, I don't think that our author doesn't present a different solution, right? Like, does the author ever say like, hey, to do so? Even if we take out preserving cultural knowledge, if we said like even if it said preserving cultural artifacts requires solutions that are more flexible than simply passing laws, does that even work?
No,
Because we don't present a different solution.
we don't say, oh, like don't even follow UNESCO, don't follow what happened in Mali, follow something else, right?
Right.
Yeah,
We say like this is better than this, not we shouldn't do either and we should do this other thing.
yeah.
Excellent.
So, see, rather than ceding to the dictates of international bodies, countries like Mali must find their own unique solution to problems concerning the preservation of cultural heritage. No, we're not saying, oh, like Mali should do something of their own. Like, I'm not saying that.
I don't hate C, to be honest. It's much more broad than what I predicted, right?
Like,
Seeding
Mali should find something of their own unique solution.
like their own unique solutions to problems concerning the preservation. Um,
Like, I don't. We didn't say, oh, like yo, like Mali, you should do your own thing, right? Like we just said, like,
right.
UNESCO might have been better than what actually happened.
All right, let's go on and try the other ones and see if another one is better.
Mm. The government of Mali should have exercised its trusteeship of the terracotta sculptures by licensing only accredited archaeologists for the excavation. Um, I don't know. Accredited archaeologists. Like, if this is referring to UNESCO, like doctrine, then isn't that fine?
Well, and we don't say that they should license only accredited archaeologists because remember part of it was that there was like not archaeologists that could be licensed, and that
Yeah.
was part of like the downfall. I'm not liking any of these. We're going to go back and read them.
Wait, and then E, the idea that cultural, artistic, and cultural patrimony is the property of state does more harm than good in countries like ours. Wait, isn't that fine?
No, because um like it's not that the idea that the artifacts are owned by the state isn't what does it harm, right? Is it the fact that what does it harm is like whatever you it's even that is still better than people just coming and taking them and running off with them.
Mm,
So I don't like any of these.
mhm.
So I really don't like C through E. So I'm gonna undo A. Oh, I will this like undo.
No, that's not fun.
Um
Like when I was reading this, Um,
I actually don't like see at all what you're saying about new thing. And I was like, oh, is it trying to move forward? No, it doesn't even give a suggestion like that at all.
yeah.
So
No, like
let's go back and see which it has to be A or B, even though I don't love one of them. Or I don't love either of them, to be honest. But let's see. All right, so what does A say? Declarations from you and other international bodies concerning the ownership of cultural artifacts gave rise. No, that's way too narrow.
yeah.
It has to be B.
Preserving cultural knowledge at sites like D requires solutions that are more flexible than simply passing or prohibiting excavation and export into use.
And so I guess what we're saying here is like just the fact that we have UNESCO like isn't good enough on its own. So like doing I think that's the closest to anything. But I agree with you. I didn't like that one when I first read it, but it's the only one that works. Do you think so?
Yeah, like now I kind of like okay, so before I got the main point of the paragraph passage wrong, that's why I chose E, because I thought like the passage was saying, oh, like UNESCO, like the
It
UNESCO,
actually it does harm and we just shouldn't have it. Is
yeah, like
that what
The
you were
UNESCO
thinking?
doctrine, the UNESCO doctrine is not like ideal for a country like Mali. And then what happened in Mali was is better than the UNESCO one, because like you know what it says like, oh, some people would still have avoided the rules, but would this not have been better than what actually happened?
Yeah.
So like I don't know, like I didn't, yeah,
You
like
misapplied that.
everything was kind of like
Yeah.
off. So I kind of
No,
like.
that makes sense.
So could you repeat like why E is wrong?
Because E says that the idea that the cultures that the artistic culture and patrimony is the property of the state does more harm than good. The idea that this doctrine says that they should be regarded as popular as property of the state is not what causes it harm. It's the idea that now people like want to hide maybe that they own them or something, but even that is still better than what originally happened is that people just went and took it and looted the place and there was no control over it at all.
Hmm.
So UNESCO actually at least protects them somewhat versus doing nothing.
Yeah, but doesn't UNESCO say that it's part of the state? It's
Yeah,
property of the state.
yeah, but because they're property of the state, that's good because that's what um
But it says it does more harm than good in countries like Mali. So we're saying UNESCO does more harm than good in
no,
countries.
that's what this answer says. I would say that UNESCO does not do more harm than good. E says that it does more harm than good. I would say it doesn't do more harm than good. It does more. I would say UNESCO does more good than harm.
Okay,
Okay.
it is.
The passage indicates that some countries have made use of UNESCO doctrine in which of the following ways. All right, so I would look at what does UNIS do? Hey, actually, this is ironic. I think that we have something right here. So
Yeah,
they strengthen the doctrine by declaring all antiquities that originate within their borders to be state property that can be freely exported. I bet that's an answer.
yeah. I went to that too when I was in the time. Um. Okay, so A, requiring the origins of all antiquities sold to collectors to be fully documented. Um, it doesn't talk about documented though, right? Like
Yeah,
it talks
and
about,
fully is really strong. We don't know that it has to be fully doctrine. So I'm going to cross that off.
restricting the export of antiquities and declaring all antiquities originating within the country's border to be state property. Yeah.
I like that. That's exactly what we just read.
Adopting plans to teach people, you know, um, encouraging trade in particular
Yeah,
ancient.
this just says that C saying like we could have done this and we didn't. It's not saying that a lot of countries do it at all.
Mm.
It just said Mali could have done this, so it's not C.
Encouraging trade in a particular ancient cultures artifact among countries, each of which contain within its boundary is a portion of that. That's just going on about something else.
Yeah, no. All right, and what about E?
Substantial resources. Like I don't think they're talking about that.
Committing substantial research to the restoration of antiquities. Yeah, like to countries like Mali, like all these countries are coming on board and going to help you rebuild. Like, no, we don't say that at all. Excellent. All right, 9. The author asked the reader to suppose that Mali had imposed a tax on exported objects, lines 49, 51, primarily in order to. So why do we bring in this? So why does the author, do you think, say this?
I think like it was just to like sort of highlight that like even in these situations, like it still wouldn't have worked out or something. It was just like an illustrative kind of like scenario.
Yeah, I think it's to show us like, even if we had done this, there still would have been issues.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So draws attention to the role of museums. No.
Yeah, no.
Praise one of the Millennium government's past policies. No, they're not
No,
praising.
we're not praising them, like, especially since they didn't even do this.
Yeah. Present one part of a more pragmatic approach to regulating trade cultural entities. No. One part of the more pragmatic.
Okay, well, go on.
So D suggests a means of giving people who excavate cultural entities incentive to keep careful records. No, it's
Nope.
not like, oh, if you do this, then you're like, yeah. Highlight a flaw in the UNESCO doctrine. Wasn't this like the flaw? Like,
Okay, so suppose Mali had required that objects be recorded and registered before leaving the excavation site and had imposed an tax on exported objects to fund acquisitions of important pieces for the National Museum. The excavations encouraged by such a system may have been less well conducted and less informative than proper professionally administrated excavations, but it would have been better. So I think the reason that there's like we bring this in is to show us like one of the ways that they could have gotten money to make it a little bit better. So I don't think that this, like the fact that they require these things is necessarily the flaw, right?
mm,
Is it a flaw that they had an imposed tax on all of these things?
no, like what I thought about it was like, again, like this was like the wrong idea of the passage because I
Mhm.
was like, oh, the UNESCO doctrine, it's like it's kind of flawed, right? That's
Yeah,
what I.
and that's why this is a tricky wrong answer, is because it is like it's not that the doctrine itself is flawed, but it creates issue, right? So it is kind of
Like there's like a drawback.
here's a drawback, yes, but the flaw itself is not that it requires them to be registered or recorded and registered and impose a tax. The flaw is that it causes people to hide stuff.
Yeah.
And so pragmatic means like sensible or like realistic. So it prevents one part of a more realistic approach to regulating trade and cultural antiquities. And I feel like that's what this is describing, is like, hey, this is why it's more realistic. Suppose we would have just done this way instead of, because the excavations, like, because it goes on to say like they're not perfect. They were administered by accredited archaeologists. Some people would have avoided the rules, but it still would have been better than what actually would have happened. Like this actually could have like realistically been implemented.
It's kind of like I feel like it's kind of like a concession. Like, okay, yeah, like maybe like it's kind of not ideal, but still like better than that.
Yes. And these are the things that actually make it like doable. And so that's why the answer is C.
Okay. And then 10, the author of the passage would most likely to agree with which one of the following statements about UNESCO. It's like when you read that, do you like go to a specific?
I predict what I think the author thinks about UNESCO, and so I'm thinking that the author thinks that the UNESCO like has a like it plays a role, but it also has some, like, it also creates some flaws.
Like it's not perfect. pretty much.
Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's better than nothing.
Mm. And like when you think of that, do you go to specific like part of the passage, or do you just like
No, I just kind of think about it big picture because this is an author opinion passage question, and I feel like I have an opinion of what the author thinks of this already.
okay. A, it can play an important role in stemming abuses that arise from international trade and cultural artifacts.
I would leave this one open.
Yeah. um, its stances on cultural artifacts emerged from, for the most part, in response. We don't know like which
Yeah,
happened.
excellent. Cross that one off right away. Like we don't know that it came from Mali.
And then it is more effective with initiatives that involve individual states and initiatives that involve several states. I don't know. I don't think we know anything about that.
Yep.
Pays too little attention to the concerns of countries like Mali. I think I picked this just because like I had the wrong idea.
Do we know? We don't know how much it pays attention to Mali or not.
Yeah, I picked this because I was like, yo, like this UNESCO thing is not good for Mali.
You're like they should have cared more about Mali when they wrote it.
You
They
know,
clearly weren't thinking about Mali.
its effectiveness in limiting the loss of cultural knowledge has been hampered by inadequate funding. Um, I wasn't sure about this, but like, where would I go to find this
Do
information?
we have an I don't think we talk about is the reason that it's limited
Because we know that
that does it have an ad I don't think we talk about it having inadequate funding at all.
we do like we talk about in the first paragraph.
But that's not UNESCO. That is Mali's government itself. Like Mali didn't have the funding to support this.
True. So A can play an important role in stemming abuses that arise from international trade in cultural artifacts. Yeah,
Definitely.
like you're saying that it could like still like people could still avoid the rules, but it's still better than like completely trashing the place and doing everything.
Yeah, and it is an important rule. Like they're saying, like, hey, you should use this.
Hmm.
All right. Okay. Whatever. That's dumb. All right. What about 11?
The author of the passage would most likely to agree with which one of the following statements about regulations governing the trade and cultural antiquities of countries like Mali. Um, like they were like kind of just not effective, right? Like even though like there was like laws against exporting and like all these things, it didn't do anything, right?
Excellent. Yep.
Such regulations must be approved by archaeologists. No.
Nope. Excellent.
Such regulations must have as their goal maximizing the number of cultural antiquities that ultimately remain in these countries. Uh, I don't remember seeing that.
Like maximizing. Yeah, we don't talk about quantities at all.
Yeah, such regulations can be beneficial even if not all people strictly comply with them. No, because we know pretty much no one complies with them right now, and how it's not beneficial.
Wait, wait, we're saying like which of the like the author of the passage would be most likely to agree with which of the following statements about regulations governing the trade and cultural equities in countries like Mali. So like if they were to use like UNESCO, what would be true about them?
Wait, is that what it's asking, or is it asking like about because you know how like Mali passed a law against excavating and exporting these sculptures, and that like they couldn't enforce it. Aren't we talking about that? Or are we talking about the UNESCO thing? Like, aren't we talking about the current situation? Like what the author thinks about the regulations in
Um,
Mali? Oh wait, no, like yeah, see, it makes sense actually because wait, no.
I like see that such regulations can be beneficial even if not all people strictly comply with them. Um,
But well, aren't we talking like when? So that part isn't that about UNESCO and not.
I think, yeah, but I think like the proposal here is, I think that maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like, suppose that from the beginning Mali had been helped by, like, I feel like when UNESCO was adapted, like it was like for everybody,
Mm,
because it was like this international, like we had this, like this document was evolved like after some of this, and it protects like all of them.
you know what confuses me? Like I don't understand the difference. Like clearly, what difference between like what's happening in Mali and what the UNESCO thing
I
is.
think Mali, like whenever we're talking about, it's like background information before this document came to be. And like because places had that issue, we then created UNESCO, which is like, it's like internationally enforced. Like,
But isn't UNESCO also saying that, oh, like all these artifacts, they're part of like the property of the culture, right? And isn't that
yeah,
what Mali said too?
is what?
Isn't that what Mali said too? Because
Well,
they
because of UNESCO, yeah. The you document is what declared those things Mali's.
mm,
So like according to like when in paragraph 3 when it says like accordingly, so according to like this UNESCO document, it seems reasonable that these antiquities are theirs.
yeah,
And then I like C because it says like some people still would have avoided the rules, but it's still better.
yeah. No, I agree. It's the but like so essentially like so the different like things going on is like in Mali, they pass a law against excavating and exporting, right? So they're
Back
kind
in the
of
day, yeah.
like they're keeping their stuff in within the state or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then also the UNESCO thing is also keeping stuff inside their own national borders.
Yes, but UNESCO is after Mali passed that law. And Mali's law that they passed on their own didn't work. But
Yeah,
UNESCO is like this international declaration that protects people, protects countries.
okay. That clears things up.
Okay, that would make a difference for sure.
Yeah, okay. The author of the passage would most likely to agree with which one of the following statements about cultural antiquities. Um, so I would say that like they definitely do belong to like right like they belong within the borders.
Yeah, I would think so too. Yes.
They must be owned and protected by countries' national museums. I don't know about the museums.
I don't think, yeah, I don't think they say it has to be owned by museums.
They must remain within boundaries of the country in which they were found. Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I would, let's leave this one open. I'm thinking like, it might not be that they have to remain in the boundaries, but they own them. So I think the country could determine to sell them if they wanted. But the country has like, but let's leave it and see if there's a better one.
They are too valuable to be owned exclusively by the state. No. Like they should be excavated by professional archaeologists when possible. I mean, I like this because it's like very soft, but I don't
Oh, me too. I love like, and I think I like D.
like
Like,
where's
yeah, like when he's not going to say they shouldn't be when not possible.
well, where does it say that though?
Um, it says that,
We have
like
been
it says like the excavations encouraged by such may have been less well conducted and less informative than proper professionally administrated. Like, so I think like whenever we can use professional and like that's better.
I still don't see like how that says oh like use professional archaeologists when possible. I don't know. Like I like because it's really like it's like very safe. Like
Um, I feel like they suggest that the expert should excavate them because it's better. Like just when possible, it's not saying like it's the end all be all, but when it's possible, professionals are better than not professionals.
mm, I see.
Like they, and I think that professionals, if professionals can preserve the most information or like, protect them the most, like that's good. That's ideal.
Yeah. They belong to whoever finds them registered.
Yeah, that one's easy to cross off.
Yeah, it's coming back to they must remain within boundaries of the country. Um, like they just say that they must be the property of the country, right? Like
Yeah, like they say that they can be. Let me see if they say it anywhere.
yeah, like in I think the second
Yeah,
paragraph.
it says suppose Malley had required the object to be recorded and registered before leaving the excavation site and had imposed a tax on exported objects. So like they're okay with things being exported. It's just that they want to have control, or like they own the process.
Mm, okay. Okay. 13. Which one of the following is an element of the author's attitude towards foreign collectors of sculptures from the I think I got this one right. This was like their approval of their aesthetic judgment.
Yeah, they like them.
Yeah, I picked up on it. So
Appreciation of, no, definitely not, because they didn't preserve the culture.
yeah,
Dismay at their failure to take action. No, because their dismay of their at their failure to take action against illegal exportation. No, because they liked that it was illegal.
yeah,
Frustration with their lack of concern. No, because they wanted them. They were selfish. And sympathy with their motives. No, definitely they just liked them.
yeah. Okay. Yeah,
Excellent.
such a weird passage. I don't know.